Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's AUXSCOUT workshop, AUXSCOUT 206, Selling AUXSCOUT to Flotillas and Divisions for Coast Guard Auxiliaries. Tonight's presenter is Robin Pope, and while Robin is speaking, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box, and we will leave time at the end to answer your questions. Robin, the floor is yours.
Bruce, thank you very much. Folks, thanks for joining us this evening as I talk about the AUXSCOUT program and ways to help sell this to your flotillas and divisions. Next slide, please. And the first question to ask is, why bother with AUXSCOUT? It's going to be some work. What are we going to get out of it? And there are a number of things that we will get out of it to benefit the auxiliary. The first is simply new resources and personnel. The adult leaders that are involved with Sea Scouts are ideal recruits for the auxiliary program. And in addition, we have motivated and engaged youth that can come into the program. Those youth bring skills that we may not have. Certainly all the scouts in my ship have social media skills, website design, coding skills that I don't have, and have an ability to reach out to youth that's different than what I have. It also gives us a partner in our boating safety mission. Sea Scouts are very involved in boating safety. Their boating safety mission matches what the auxiliary does, and if they're going out and doing it, we're going out and doing it. We can do better if we work together. Next slide, please. AUXSCOUT is a new program, so it's important that we create good first impressions. And the impressions that we give as auxiliaries working with Sea Scouts are going to mold the way that this program expands and runs for the next decade. Several ways that we can do that are to help provide adult mentorship to youth in your community. I think we've all met youth that just don't have many positive adult role leaders or role models in their life. And as auxiliary members, we have the opportunity to take that role and provide an example to youth and give a positive impact to them as they're growing up. That positive impact can also reflect on the Coast Guard Community Service and the Coast Guard Auxiliary. That'll create potentially a recruiting pipeline for the active duty Coast Guard, for the Coast Guard Academy, for the Reserve, and for the Auxiliary. Next slide, please. So there are lots of opportunities for us to work with Sea Scouts, and we're going to talk about the full gamut and then talk about some of the objections and how we might respond to them. So easy things to do are public education events. Sea Scouts need boating education. We provide it. It's a great way to work together. Sea Scouts generally require that they have vessel safety checks performed on all of their vessels every year. Another great way to interact with them. Being involved in public affairs and program visits to Scout shops and Scout camps, and then assisting with Scout merit badge classes, camporees, and other training events. Scout leaders are always looking for adults to help provide additional training, and we have the knowledge and the ability to help provide that training to them. Next slide, please. We can provide some excellent information on career education and guidance, and that can be in maritime careers. Certainly that's something the auxiliary is going to specialize in, and particularly in Coast Guard careers. But each member of the auxiliary has done something in their life outside of this volunteer role, and we can pass that knowledge on to the Sea Scouts as well. Sea Scouts have requirements for rank advancement, and we can assist with that in a formal or informal fashion, and we can certainly assist with on-water activity and training. Sea Scouting is all about getting out on boats, and we have a lot to offer there to make sure that they're doing it correctly and doing it safely. Next slide, please. But with those opportunities, there are certainly some objections, and objections about unit capacity in terms of time, personnel, and facilities. A friend of mine is a division commander who's involved in aircraft operations, and he simply says, we don't have any room for Sea Scouts on our aircraft operations. Liability is a concern. What liability are we as auxiliary members going to be exposed to? What are we going to do if a scout's injured or if they make some accusations against it? Their training requirements, And there's some concerns about how Sea Scouts will behave while they're on our boats or at our events. Next slide, please. There have been questions about how we'll outfit Sea Scouts with personal protective equipment, and even if we'll have facilities that we can put them on. There are lots of questions about the logistics. How do we document what we do? What type of paperwork is needed? And what do we do if the mission changes? If we start out on a training mission and then need to be deployed to a search and rescue mission or some other type of rescue mission. People have had questions about uniforms and asked how we'll manage that. Next slide, please. And there's certainly been questions about the level of support the Sea Scouting and the AUXSCOUT program receive at the Boy Scout Council level, at the Flotilla level, and at the division level. So let's take a look at each of those and give a response to them. Next slide, please. In terms of capacity, AUXSCOUT is a voluntary program, the auxiliary is a voluntary program, and Sea Scouting is a voluntary program. So when we're looking at a group of volunteers doing something and potentially taking on a new role, the first thing we really have to do is assess our capacity and our resources. Sea Scouting, like any other type of scouting program, is time intensive, it's labor intensive. For many of us, it's a labor of love as we see the impact that it's had on our own children, their friends, and then as our children have left the program and aged out, we watch what new children and new youth get exposed to. To do that successfully, we again need to assess our capacities, and we need to remember that there's a lot of things that we can do. We can participate on varying levels, and if we can't offer something, there's no shame in being honest about that. I would say that it is much better to do solid work on a small scale and succeed than try to do big work on a big scale without the resources, without the thought put in advance, and fail at it. Next slide, please. Liability is a concern. We all know that we can get sued for things. We don't want that to happen. But there's a strong risk management program involved with scouting. Scouts are covered by a strong liability policy. Auxiliaries that are acting as auxiliaries assigned to duty are covered by a strong liability policy. If auxiliary members function as scout leaders, they're covered under the Boy Scouts of America liability policy. And both Scouts and the Coast Guard have strong policies and procedures aimed at reducing liability exposure. Essentially, if we follow the policies that are established, we use good judgment, follow good risk management protocols, we're going to reduce that risk to an acceptable level, mitigate it wherever possible, and hopefully not have to deal with it beyond that. Next slide, please. There are some training requirements, and I suspect that at least a few people on this call, when they joined the auxiliary, joined with the idea that things were going to be great, and then their training officer said, oh, by the way, here's all this stuff that you need to do. Same thing happens in scouting. There is some stuff that you need to do, and it's designed to help protect us, help protect leaders, and help protect the scouts. The key thing that needs to be done is youth protection training. That's about an hour-and-a-half program, about an hour program rather, that gives you information on how to avoid potential abuse situations. And it's not intended to say that anyone is going to abuse scouts or anybody else. It's intended to point out things that we might do innocently that might put us at risk. It's intended to point out risky behaviors that you might see in other people, both adults and scouts, and give you guidance on how to respond to that. Other training that's involved is Safety Afloat, which is about a 30-minute program that gives the scouts' approach to risk management. Safe Swim Defense is another 30-minute program giving information on their approach to risk management for swimming. Weather Hazards is actually a great program for anybody to take, whether or not they're a scout, that talks about how to identify, manage, and deal with weather hazards. I'd actually recommend that for any auxiliarist that's going to be on the water. It's a free course, easy to take, lots of good information. We need to have CPR and first aid training if we're going to be on the water with scouts. Boat crew members need to have that anyway. That shouldn't be an issue. And then both the auxiliary program and the scouts have individual member training. So Sea Scout leaders need to have Sea Scout leader training. Auxiliary members need to have their basic training, and they need to essentially be basically qualified. Next slide, please. We worry about Sea Scout behavior because when we think about scouts, we often think about little Cub Scouts that are running around playing like little kids. And at age 8, that's what we should expect from little kids. Sea Scouts are different. Sea Scouts are age 14 to 20. They're generally youth that have already been involved in scouting at some type and have chosen to pursue Sea Scouting because they want to continue in the scouting program. Some of these young men and women could enlist in the Coast Guard tomorrow. They could be active duty in a few months. Some of them could be applying to the Coast Guard Academy and probably wouldn't graduate in time to actually be officers overseeing this, but certainly could be in their training period while they are still Sea Scouts. So these are young men and women. They're not little kids. We have a reasonable expectation of high quality, highly professional behavior from them. That's reinforced by the code of conduct that Sea Scouts have with each ship. Each ship is supposed to have a code of conduct that describes what's considered acceptable behavior. And most Sea Scout youth are intelligent, motivated, and mature young men and women that follow that rule. In addition, Sea Scouts that are under age 18 have to have an adult acting in loco parentis with them. So these are not young men and women that will be 14, 15 without a parental figure. There'll be somebody there to help manage their behavior. But the reality is that participating in Sea Scout and participating in all auxiliary programs at that age is a privilege. And if there is a problem, it's a privilege that can easily be revoked. My experience, though, has been that the Sea Scouts in my ship and in other ships that I've worked with are people that I would be more than happy to have on a boat with me when we're out on the water. Next slide, please. Personal protective equipment. Everybody needs a life jacket. Sea Scouts who join the auxiliary are going to be issued personal protective equipment just as any other auxiliary member would be. And Scouts are required to use appropriate personal protective equipment, life jackets and other equipment, on all boating activities. So if an auxiliary unit doesn't have extra life jackets that are appropriate for the Scouts should be able to provide them. I can tell you that with my ship, the life jackets that the individual Scouts use are higher quality than what we issue in the auxiliary. So that should not be an issue at all. Next slide, please. Facilities. We're potentially taking slots on a vessel and replacing auxiliarists with Sea Scouts. That could be a problem, but it shouldn't be. Auxiliary members who are already involved with this should not be displaced. AUXSCOUT should be a program that complements, not replaces what's going on. The other issue is that Sea Scouts have boats. So when Sea Scouts come into the auxiliary, it's possible that we would, instead of losing facility spaces, actually gain facilities. So that bringing in Sea Scouts is going to open up new opportunities for auxiliaries to get on the water. Next slide, please. Logistics and paperwork. Every organization seems to thrive on paperwork, but there is a lot of help for it. Just as there is paperwork for the auxiliary, there is paperwork for Scouts. Other Scout leaders and each council can help with that. And councils are essentially divisions for Scouting. In terms of logistics and paperwork, Sea Scout units often are already very familiar with it and can help with that, and they can bring significant capabilities into our units. In terms of dealing with mission changes, anytime we put a guest on a vessel, we have to be prepared for a mission to change. That might mean making sure that there's another vessel to take that search and rescue operation. It might mean planning to have the Scout and their guardian sit up in the survivor hatch. It might mean dropping a guest off at a dock. But those are things that we can plan for in advance and make sure that they're taken care of in advance so it's not a surprise. It's really all part of our risk management program. Next slide, please. Uniforms. As auxiliarists, we wear uniforms when we're out doing things, and Sea Scouts do that as well. Sea Scouts who are members of the auxiliary, because Sea Scouts are able to join the auxiliary at age 14, if they're acting as auxiliaries, they'll be in their auxiliary uniform, just as any other auxiliary member would be. If they are acting as Sea Scouts, they'd wear their appropriate Sea Scout uniform, and you can see the young man here in his Sea Scout uniform. It looks similar to, but not identical to, a Coast Guard uniform. Auxiliary members who are working as auxiliary members with Sea Scouts would be in an auxiliary uniform, but auxiliary members can also act as individuals working with Sea Scout units, in which case they'd be in a Sea Scout uniform. Next slide, please. Council support. It's nice to have support from people if you're doing things. And Boy Scout councils are evaluated on the basis of how many units they're supporting, how those units grow, and how many new units form. It is literally their job to help you develop new units and make sure that those units grow. That's what they're paid to do. They should be helping you with that, and you should be able to count on your council for support. Next slide, please. To get that council support, you can reach out to Sea Scout Commodores, and you can find a list of those through Boy Scout websites. You can reach out to the AUXSCOUT staff, and our contact information is on the AUXB Wiki page and on the youth programs page. Reach out to the district executives, which are kind of paid representatives of the Scouts that go out to local units and work with them. You can request a unit commissioner that's knowledgeable about Sea Scouting. Unit commissioners are volunteers in Scouting, generally with significant Scouting experience and experience helping start up Scouting units. And you can turn this around. Instead of asking for support, you can offer support. As I said earlier, Scout units are always looking for people to help with training programs. So have the auxiliary go out and offer to do vessel safety checks and boater safety training. That makes us more valuable to the Scouts, makes it easier to develop a connection, and makes it easier to ask for council support. Next slide, please. Flotilla and division support. I think the first thing to recognize here is that the National Commodore has said that AUXSCOUT should be a priority. This is an important program, and at the national level, this does have support. When we look at the local level, where people are actually carrying out that national directive, the first thing to do is recognize that starting and running a Scouting unit is a lot of work. If we go into it with the eyes open and recognize and expect that work, nobody's going to be disappointed. When we charter a Sea Scout ship, there are policies that are written down that we're required to follow, both through the AUXSCOUT program and through BSA. But we don't have to charter an organization. We don't have to actually sponsor a Sea Scout ship, although that's kind of the ultimate level of participation. Remember that flotillas can participate at different levels, so assess what you can do and do what you can. It's best to do a little bit well than to try to take on a big project and fail at it. It's also important to recognize that you don't have to do everything right now. We can go out and do an individual boating class this year. And if that goes well, next year we'll maybe do 2 boating classes and have Sea Scouts start coming to flotilla meetings or division meetings. And as that goes well, we can continue to build on the program so that instead of trying to do everything at once without any backbone, without any support, we've built support as we go. That support's important because Sea Scouts and their families can make a strong addition to the flotilla and to the divisions and to the Coast Guard Auxiliary as a whole. Again, these are motivated people that bring strong skill sets, strong interest in boating and boating safety. They can help us achieve our mission as we help them achieve their mission. Next slide, please. So what's the best way to do it? And the best way really is whatever works for your unit. So I've written here, your options include limited participation, which means just doing it once a year. If you only interact with the Sea Scout unit once a year, there are very minimal training requirements. If you want to do it more than once a year, there are some additional training requirements, not onerous ones. You just have to do the youth protection and potentially safe swim defense and safety afloat, but there is more that's involved. We can formally partner with a Sea Scout ship, set up some formal agreements with training opportunities, and then ultimately you can charter a Sea Scout ship. Again, that's not something that you have to do right away. Start small, build on your successes. Also remember that just because we are auxiliaries doesn't mean that we have to be in the auxiliary uniform functioning as auxiliaries to help Sea Scouts and to help other scouting programs. Auxiliaries have joined Sea Scouts as scout leaders for decades. Just because we take off our auxiliary uniform, that doesn't make us lose our knowledge, skills, and abilities. We bring those to Scouts, and whether we are formally representing the auxiliary or just acting as an interested community member, we can still help these youth succeed. Next slide, please. So some take-home messages. Whatever you do, take some time to plan and prepare it. Be honest about your capacities and the interest within the flotilla and within the community. One of the things that can be challenging is gaining that interest, but we have a lot to offer. Sea Scouting has a lot to offer. I mean, we're going out and playing on boats. I think most of us understand how much fun that is, and if there's any question, it's not why would people do it, it's why wouldn't they do it. Take the time to establish partnerships and relationships and build on those, and then do the best you can within your capacities. I'd also add, as you're doing that, be creative. I've learned this weekend that there were some questions about my Sea Scout ship because I'm located on the border of 3 Coast Guard districts. So the district that my flotilla works with is in a different district than where my Sea Scout ship is. So don't hesitate to reach across boundaries if you need to help develop this relationship. Next slide, please. So remember that the potential rewards are high. Partnerships are going to help the auxiliary spread its boating safety message. We're encouraging the next generation of boaters by giving them the tools to boat safely. We're motivating and challenging the youth of our communities as we introduce them to the Coast Guard, its missions, and recruit them into the Coast Guard family, creating a wide outward positive ripple effect. Next slide, please. And I'll take any questions.
And I'm going to leave the resources page up for a minute so that people can copy those. We have some questions that have come in, and I'll read them from the chat box. And Robin, if you want to take it, you can. And if you'd rather that I take it, just let me know. The first one comes in from Michael. If we take Sea Scouts on a patrol, do we need to issue a PLB?
I'm going to defer to you, but I believe the answer is no.
And the answer is no, but it will be determined by your district's OTO. We are required to ensure that the Sea Scout or Sea Scout leader has appropriate PPE, personal protective equipment, and we can ask the Sea Scouts to bring the life jackets that they're already using with them. If your OTO requires more PPE, then it will be up to us to issue that, and presumably the district would provide that. Okay, this question from Jeff. In our district, PPE is not issued by the Coast Guard, the OTO, until boat crew candidates pass all shoreside PQS requirements. Equipment availability is limited.
And in that case, yeah,
go ahead.
Same
go
thing. Ahead. So if the Sea Scout is an auxiliary member, then they would be issued equipment as with anybody else. If they're not an auxiliary member, they would be expected to bring their own equipment.
Correct.
And they should have that equipment.
Correct. While people are thinking about their questions, I just want to mention to you that we have workshops nearly every Sunday evening, and those are publicized on Auxby Wiki. The address for that is up on the screen right now. It's also publicized on the Facebook group, and that is publicized there. If you're not already a member of the Facebook group and you do Facebook, would strongly encourage you to consider subscribing to that. It's a great place for getting information about upcoming training, and it's a place where both auxiliaries and Sea Scout leaders can share ideas to help make this work. All right, Doug has a comment. If a Sea Scout joins our flotilla, what are the training requirements for the flotilla?
So the primary training requirement is youth protection for a number of the leadership team, including the flotilla commander, the vice commander, and then on the standard operating procedure, there's a list of everybody else that's required. And then anyone that is going to interact with the Sea Scout as a youth more than once a year outside of regular meetings and other public events also has to have youth protection training. And that, again, is just to protect the scout and the adults. We're taking people. Go ahead.
I wanted to fine-tune that just a little bit. First of all, the Coast Guard and the Coast Guard Auxiliary is strongly encouraging everyone to take youth protection training. Whether you are directly involved with the Sea Scouts or not, it's just really good training to take. It takes about an hour and a half to complete. Once you've completed it, you receive a completion certificate. And what you should do with that is give a copy of that to your flotilla commander, who will send it into your DIROCS and get it added to your training record in AUX data. The requirement that Robin was mentioning was specifically for flotillas or divisions that charter Sea Scout ships. There are particular positions that would require you, that would have to be youth protection trained. And then if you are working directly with Sea Scouts, whether they're a member of the flotilla or not, outside of regular flotilla meetings or outside of publicly available public education events, then you would want to take the youth protection training. I'm sorry to have interrupted. Did I cover what you meant to cover, Robin?
Yes. The only other thing I would add is that if we're taking scouts on patrols, then at least one auxiliarist on the vessel needs to be trained in CPR, safe swim defense, and safety afloat.
Right, exactly. And it will be up to the mission lead, who would be the coxswain, to confirm that at least one auxiliarist has that training. Are there other questions? We've been seeing quite an uptick in interest in what we're doing. What we've been finding is that not only has this been good for membership and recruitment, but in some cases, this is helping flotillas that have been looking for a new project to help turn around their fortunes, to really have something that they can focus on. These young people really have a lot of enthusiasm for what they do, and that enthusiasm can become pretty infectious. All right, let's see, we've got some more questions from James. In our state, Pennsylvania, everyone has to have a children and youth clinical check. Well, I think you will need to check with your local state and see what the requirements are. If you register as a BSA registered volunteer, BSA will take care of that as a matter of course. And you can do that without there being an expectation that you're going to be doing a whole heck of a lot. What we've heard in some areas is that some auxiliaries are registering as merit badge counselors. And if you did that, you would get that background check, and BSA does not charge a registration fee for merit badge counselors. So that's one very low impact way of doing that sort of thing. Lori has the question, is the loco parentis part of the ship or flotilla? If a Sea Scout who is under the age of 18 wants to visit a flotilla meeting or an auxiliary activity, they must be accompanied by either a parent or a Sea Scout leader. They can't just show up on their own. They're required to have a parent or a Sea Scout leader to function in that regard. So that shouldn't be a problem for you. Let's see. If you have,
and Bruce,
yeah, go ahead.
correct me if I'm wrong, but that could be a Sea Scout leader who is a member of the auxiliary.
Yes, of course.
Someone willing to take that role.
Yes, and if it's an activity that requires the scout to do more than just sit and listen, there will be a permission form. BSA has parental permission forms that the parent can fill out and sign, which basically gives rights to the scout to do the activity and for somebody to serve in loco parentis. James, it looks like your question got cut off. Let's see, Lori, do the loco parentis still travel in twos like in the regular BSA? I'm going to try to restate that. What scouts are taught to do is to always be in pairs, and that is good practice, and that really gets back to a central point that is in the standard operating procedure for this, which is that we are never to be never put ourselves in a one-on-one situation with a scout. We always want to ensure that there's at least one other adult within line of eyesight. They don't have to be right there, but they have to be able to see what's going on. I don't know whether I answered your question, Lori, but I think that was where you were driving at. While we're on that subject and while you're thinking about questions, the Boy Scouts of America, as I'm sure you know, didn't always take youth protection as seriously as they do today. But beginning in the mid 80s, they came to realize that they had a problem and that they had to do something about it. At that time, they developed the youth protection training and have been constantly working on it since then to make it a better and better training program. And I believe that it is seen broadly as one of the best out there. The Scouts have a lot riding on it. They want to ensure that the young people have a safe experience in their scouting lives. And while not quite as important, but still significant, we as adult volunteers want to make sure that we're never put in a position where we could be accused of having done something that we didn't do. And so that's a piece of the youth protection training, is not only ensuring the safety of the young people, but also ensuring that we are interacting with them in a safe way that precludes the possibility that somebody could say that we did something that we didn't say, it didn't do. I hope that makes sense. Are there other questions?
Question about Sea Scouts and AUXPAD, and that's a good question. Right now, the rule is that Sea Scouts cannot qualify as AUXPAD paddlecraft operators or qualifiers. However, like all auxiliaries, they're able to train. So if they are auxiliary members, they can train in the AUXPAD program, and then presumably the day they turn 17, they could complete their qualifications.
We have a comment from Bill Smith. He is our new branch chief for marketing and social media and youth programs. And he is putting out a plea that if you have stories about working with Sea Scouts, he would love to hear about them. His email address is bill.smith@cgauxnet.us. He would love to work with you. Yeah, I'm not going to give you this. You can look him up. He's in Aux directory, and his name is H. William Smith. So give him a shout, and he would love to work with you to publicize what you're doing. Let's see, here's a question. How can Sea Scouts achieve rank who need to have multiple days on the water overnight with youth in leader roles? Robin, you want to take that one?
Sure. The same way they would anywhere else. They can do multi-day trips as a Sea Scout. That shouldn't be an issue. They wouldn't necessarily have to do it on an auxiliary patrol, and certainly since patrol is only supposed to last no more than 8 hours, that would be a challenge. But acting as a Sea Scout unit, they can do multi-day trips without any problem. And if a scout ship is chartered to a flotilla, they don't have to operate under orders from the auxiliary. They can do their own thing acting as Sea Scouts.
Right, and a lot of the on the water activity that Sea Scouts do would likely be in boats that probably wouldn't lend themselves to OPFACs. For example, Robin's ship focuses on paddling, and you know, while they're great for what they are, it's not what most of us use for patrols, for example. We have a question, is the minimum age for a scout to become an actual auxiliary 17? Thank you, Gary, for asking that question. A Sea Scout who is a currently registered Sea Scout can apply for full auxiliary membership at age 14. That's the only exception to the minimum age of 17. Sea Scout who is at least 14 years old, and there are a few Sea Scouts who are 13 and some months, but a Sea Scout would have to be at least 14, and they would go through the same membership application process that any other potential member would go through. And if they want to retain their auxiliary membership, they will have to continue to be a Sea Scout, registered Sea Scout, until at least their 17th birthday. Okay, do we have any other questions?